Send a human to the most dangerous empire in the galaxy, make him a hero, and then offer him a princess as a reward. But she is no ordinary reward, jealous, proud, and fiercely independent. The choice is not just hers. He must decide what this gift truly means. The first thing Adrian noticed was that the alien empire applauded in perfect synchronization. Not almost synchronized, not politely scattered, perfect. Thousands of green hands rose and fell at exactly the same moment, producing a single, unified sound that echoed through the vast chamber like a mechanical heartbeat. It did not swell or fade. It did not ripple. It simply existed, precise and controlled, as if the air itself had agreed to cooperate. Adrian stood in the center of it, unsure where to look or what part of his body he was supposed to move. He settled on blinking. Blinking seemed safe. His boots rested on a floor that wasn't entirely solid. Light moved beneath its surface in slow currents, like something alive was trapped under glass and trying not to be noticed. He resisted the urge to tap his foot and apologize to it. He was fairly certain this was the most important moment of his life. He was also fairly certain he had spinach stuck in his teeth. He subtly pressed his tongue along the inside of his mouth, searching for betrayal. Nothing obvious. That didn't mean anything. Spinach was patient. Spinach waited. "Captain Adrian Vane," said a voice that did not come from a person, but from everywhere at once. Adrian straightened instinctively. He was standing before the High Convergence Assembly of the Eltharin Empire, a species that had crossed galaxies before humans had figured out how to keep ice cream from crystallizing in low gravity. Their technology surrounded him in quiet, effortless superiority. The walls curved upward into a ceiling filled with suspended rings of pale white light, each ring rotating at a slightly different speed, like an elaborate system designed purely to make humans feel underqualified. Which was working very well. "You acted," the voice continued, calm and vast, "when calculation suggested withdrawal." Adrian cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "with respect, calculation was being dramatic." There was a pause. He immediately regretted speaking. But then something unexpected happened. A faint ripple moved through the assembly, not movement exactly, more like a tension adjusting itself. "You perceived alternative probability," the voice said. Adrian considered explaining that his alternative probability had mostly consisted of panic and caffeine, but decided to let them have their version. It sounded more respectable. "Yes," he said. This was, technically, not a lie. Panic was a form of perception. He glanced briefly upward at the suspended projection in the center of the chamber. It showed the orbital stabilizer he had repaired 3 days ago, the massive ring structure that had been seconds away from catastrophic collapse. He remembered the heat, the alarms, the smell of overloaded circuits. He also remembered shouting at the stabilizer. "Don't you dare die on me," he had said. In hindsight, he wasn't sure if that had helped, but the stabilizer had survived. So he was willing to take partial credit for emotional support. "Your intervention preserved 900 million Eltharin lives," the voice said. Adrian shifted uncomfortably. When they used numbers that large, it stopped feeling like something he had done and started feeling like something that had happened to him. "You did not hesitate," the voice added. Adrian resisted the urge to laugh. He had hesitated. He had hesitated so hard he had nearly invented a new form of hesitation. But eventually, he had moved. Eventually, he always moved. A pathway opened through the assembly, not by people stepping aside, but by the floor itself extending forward, forming a narrow bridge of solid light. At the far end of it, someone stood waiting. Adrian noticed her ears first. They were long, elegant, extending behind her head in a gentle arc, their edges thin and precise like sculpted crystal. They moved slightly as she shifted her weight, not randomly, but with subtle responsiveness, like they were listening to things the rest of the room could not hear. Her skin was green. Not harsh or artificial, but soft, natural, like the surface of a leaf illuminated by morning sun. Her blonde hair fell over her shoulders in smooth waves, catching the white glow of the chamber's light. She stood perfectly still, her posture straight, her hands resting calmly at her sides. Her face was composed, too composed. Her eyes met his. and Adrian felt with absolute certainty that she did not want to be here. He smiled politely. She did not smile back. Her expression remained unchanged, but something in her gaze sharpened, as if she had just confirmed a private suspicion. The voice spoke again. "Princess Lyriel." Her name seemed to settle into the air itself. She stepped forward onto the bridge. Her movement was effortless, controlled, every step exact. Adrian suddenly became aware of his own posture, his shoulders, his hands, his face. He had no idea what his face was doing. He hoped it wasn't doing anything strange. His face had betrayed him before. Princess Lyriel stopped a few steps away from him. Up close, her eyes were even more unsettling. Not because they were alien, because they were not. They held something painfully familiar. Fear, hidden, restrained, but present. She looked at him the way someone looked at an outcome they did not trust. "Captain Adrian Vane," she said. Her voice was clear, steady, also cold enough to preserve food. "Princess Lyriel," he replied. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to bow. He compromised by nodding slightly, which felt like the diplomatic equivalent of shrugging. Silence stretched between them. He became very aware of the fact that thousands of people were watching. He resisted the urge to wave again. The voice returned. "Eltherin tradition recognizes acts that alter the continuity of existence." Adrian did not like where this was going. Traditions were dangerous. Traditions did not negotiate. Traditions did not care about comfort. Rewards must reflect permanence. Adrian definitely did not like where this was going. Princess Lyriel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She knew, she had known before he did, which felt deeply unfair. "We therefore offer you," the voice said, calm and absolute, "Princess Lyriel." Adrian blinked. He waited for the rest of the sentence. There was no rest of the sentence. He glanced behind him, just to confirm there wasn't another Adrian Vane standing there more qualified to receive a princess. There was. He pointed gently at himself. "Yes," the voice said. Adrian lowered his hand. This was, without question, the strangest promotion he had ever received. Princess Lyriel spoke. "You may decline," she said. Her tone suggested she would strongly support that decision. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her. She stood perfectly still, but her ears had shifted slightly backward. Not aggressive, defensive. He realized suddenly that she wasn't standing there like a prize. She was standing there like someone waiting for rejection. And against all logic, all protocol, all expectation, Adrian found himself smiling. Not the polite smile he had been using, a real one. "Well," he said, "this is new." Her expression flickered. Confusion, just for a second. And in that second, something changed. Adrian discovered very quickly that the alien empire had no concept of giving someone a moment to emotionally recover. Within 10 minutes of being offered a princess, he was given living quarters. Within 20 minutes, those living quarters had reconfigured themselves twice. Within 30 minutes, he had apologized to a wall. "I didn't mean to insult you," Adrian said, standing awkwardly in the center of the room. The wall remained silent. He wasn't sure if that meant forgiveness or passive aggression. The chamber around him was circular, its surface smooth and pale, interrupted only by faint vertical lines that pulsed with dim light. There were no visible doors, but he had entered somehow, and he suspected he would leave the same way, by politely believing in it. He took a careful step forward. The floor responded. It adjusted its firmness beneath his boot, subtly reshaping itself to match the exact pressure distribution of his weight. Adrian froze. "Okay," he said quietly. "That's unsettling." He took another step. The floor adjusted again. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't hostile. It was helpful. And that was somehow worse. He crouched slowly and touched the surface. It was warm, not warm like machinery, warm like something alive. He immediately withdrew his hand. "Sorry," he muttered. The wall behind him shifted, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough that he felt it. He turned. A section of the curved surface separated soundlessly, folding inward to form an opening. Princess Lyriel stepped inside. Adrian straightened so quickly he nearly injured his spine. She looked exactly as she had before. Composed. Controlled. Her green skin caught the soft ambient light, and her blonde hair rested neatly over her shoulders. Her long ears were angled slightly outward, attentive, alert. She studied him, not casually, carefully. He became aware that he was still standing in the middle of the room like someone who had been abandoned by his own instructions. "Hello," he said. He winced internally. Hello. He had greeted an alien princess. The alien princess offered to him as a permanent, life-altering reward with hello. She did not respond immediately. Her gaze moved briefly to the wall, then back to him. "You spoke to the architecture," she said. It was not a question. Adrian cleared his throat. "Yes." Silence. He felt compelled to elaborate. "It started it." Her ears twitched slightly. He wasn't sure if that was confusion or irritation or the alien equivalent of suppressing a laugh. "The architecture does not start things," she said. Adrian gestured carefully at the floor. "It moved. It adapted. That's just a polite word for moving." Her eyes narrowed slightly. He realized too late that he might be arguing with a princess about floor semantics. He raised his hands gently. "I respect its commitment to hospitality." Another pause. Her gaze lingered on him, searching, evaluating. He had the distinct sensation that she was trying to solve him like a mathematical problem she did not trust. "You are not afraid," she said. Adrian considered lying. He decided against it. "I am afraid," he said. "I'm just also tired." This seemed to surprise her. "You hide it." "I hide lots of things," Adrian said. "Mostly confusion." That earned him the smallest reaction so far. Her lips shifted, not a smile, but the memory of one. She stepped further into the room. The wall closed behind her without a sound. Adrian tried not to stare at her ears. He failed. They were extraordinary. They moved slightly as she walked, adjusting to subtle sounds he could not hear. He wondered if they could hear his heartbeat. He hoped not. It was currently behaving like a malfunctioning engine. "You may refuse," she said. Her voice was steady, careful, controlled. He blinked. "Refuse? The offering? Oh, that." He scratched the back of his neck. "Yes," he said. "That was mentioned." She watched him closely. "You should understand the consequences." He waited. She did not continue. He tilted his head slightly. "Which are?" Her jaw tightened slightly. "You would leave." He frowned. "I can leave anyway." She didn't respond. And in that silence, he realized something important. She wasn't talking about permission. She was talking about expectation. "They think you'll go," he said quietly. Her eyes flickered, just slightly. It was enough. "They think all humans go," she said. Adrian nodded slowly. "That's fair," he admitted. "We do move around a lot. It's one of our defining personality flaws." Her ears shifted forward slightly. Interest, despite herself. He smiled faintly. "We invented something called the weekend," he continued. "It's a system where people escape their responsibilities briefly and then complain about returning to them." She stared at him. "That sounds inefficient." "It's extremely inefficient." Silence settled between them again, not hostile, just uncertain. She walked past him, examining the room. Her movements were precise, graceful. Adrian became aware of the fact that this was her empire, her home. He was the temporary variable. "Are you disappointed?" she asked suddenly. He blinked. "About what?" Her hands tightened slightly at her sides. "That this is your reward." He stared at her, really stared at her. She wasn't asking out of pride. She was asking out of fear. Fear that she was insufficient. Fear that she was unwanted. Fear that he would confirm it. He spoke carefully. "I don't know you," he said. Her expression hardened slightly. He raised a hand gently. "But," he added, "I'd like to." That stopped her completely. Her ears froze, her breathing paused. She turned to face him fully. "Why?" she asked. The question was quiet, dangerous, honest. He shrugged slightly. "Because you came here yourself." She frowned. That was expected. "No," he said gently. "It was required, but you still chose how you walked in." She stared at him, trying to understand. "You didn't look proud," he continued. Her jaw tightened. "You didn't look angry," he said. She blinked. "You looked." He paused. He chose the word carefully. "Brave." The word landed between them. She inhaled sharply, as if the air had changed density. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room remained still around them, its living surfaces quietly observing. She looked at him differently now, not with suspicion, not entirely, but with uncertainty, and something else, something fragile, something new. "You are strange," she said. Adrian smiled faintly. "I get that a lot." And for the first time since entering the alien empire, Princess Lyriel almost smiled without stopping herself. Adrian had learned that in the Eltherin Empire, time had a certain flexibility. Not the polite flexibility of, "let's meet an hour later," or the human flexibility of 5 minutes is subjective, but a soft, persistent malleability that bent itself around presence and choice. He noticed it most clearly when Princess Lyriel was nearby. Days seemed to stretch without explanation, and yet moments with her snapped into sharp clarity, punctuated like a starburst across the sky. He had once believed that being offered a princess was a burden. Now, he realized, it was a proposition, a universe rearranged to test something far older than protocol, the willingness to remain when the easy option was to leave. They walked together through the observation decks, a lattice of transparent floors suspended in the vastness above the palace's core. Stars flickered below like luminescent fish caught in a cosmic tide. Adrian's boots made no sound. Lyriel's ears twitched as she observed his cautious steps, the subtle imperfection in his gait that spoke more of humanity than she had expected. "You're still talking to the floors," she said, her voice teasing, though there was warmth beneath it. "They started it," Adrian said. "I'm just making sure they're honest about intentions this time." She let out a short laugh, a sound that seemed foreign in the quiet grandeur of the empire. It was small, almost mischievous, but it carried weight. For the first time, she didn't feel like a distant figure in a ceremony of expectation. She felt like someone who could be amused by him, by the ridiculousness of a human interacting with everything as if it had agency. Weeks had passed. He had learned the subtle etiquette of the palace, which included acknowledging floors and ceilings, bowing slightly to suspended lights, and nodding to walls if they hummed disapproval. But more importantly, he had learned about Lyriel. The princess, once a figure of composure and contained apprehension, had begun to soften around him. Not completely. Her ears still twitched at unexpected sounds. Her green eyes still held that trace of wariness. But she smiled more often, allowed herself brief exclamations when a star behaved unusually, or when Adrian claimed that a gravity-manipulated flower had winked at him. One evening, they stood together on the highest deck, where the vacuum of space pressed against the transparent floor below. Stars blazed in colors impossible to describe with human language, and the distant glow of a collapsing sun was held in stasis by the Empire's containment fields. "You could leave," Lyriel said. Her voice was measured, cautious, like a delicate instrument calibrated to avoid breaking. "Yes," Adrian replied, casually leaning on the railing. "I could." Her gaze lingered on him. "And yet you have not." "I have not." His answer was simple. He watched the stars flicker in the containment field, the artificial light refracting through the glass at odd angles. "I could have left the moment the Empire offered me this." He gestured vaguely toward her, toward everything. "But leaving feels unfinished." "Unfinished?" she asked, her voice curious, not scolding. "Yes," he said. "Because if I left, I would always wonder if I made the right choice, not just for myself, but for you. And if I stayed, at least I know I made the choice consciously." He turned to look at her directly, meeting the green glow of her eyes. "And maybe that's worth more than any protocol or tradition." Her expression softened. Her ears shifted slightly backward, a subtle sign of acceptance. She allowed herself to step closer, but not too close, still maintaining the space of autonomy. "You are strange," she said, the ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "I get that a lot," Adrian replied with a faint grin. "Mostly from humans, and occasionally from floors." She laughed this time, a genuine, unguarded sound that resonated across the observation deck. For a moment, the Empire, the stars, the universe itself seemed to pause and listen. "You have changed," Lyriel said quietly, her tone reflective. "Not just yourself, but how I see things, how I see people." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "You mean me, or humans in general?" You, she said, mainly you, but in that, humans too. Her ears twitched forward slightly, emphasizing her sincerity. You remind me that choices matter, that we are not bound solely by duty or fear. Adrian considered her words. He had come to the Empire expecting ceremony, recognition, and perhaps discomfort. What he found was challenge, laughter, and connection. He realized now that bravery was not just in facing collapsing orbital stations, but in facing uncertainty in companionship. And love, or something like it, was the bravest thing of all. He reached out hesitantly, brushing a hand against hers. The motion was deliberate, cautious, but filled with intention. Lyriel did not flinch. She allowed him the contact, her fingers adjusting slightly to meet his grip. It was an understanding neither had voiced, a promise beyond ceremony or expectation. The Empire had offered him a reward meant to honor his deeds, a princess meant to symbolize gratitude and continuity. But in choosing to stay, in choosing presence over obligation, he had discovered a reward far beyond any protocol. It was a connection forged not by decree, but by conscious, shared choice. Weeks turned into months, and the palace, once a maze of alien architecture, became a home. Adrian learned the subtle intricacies of alien social rituals, the language of ear movements, and the playful logic of gravity fields designed for aesthetic rather than utility. Lyriel, in turn, learned that humans were unpredictable in charming ways, that humor could diffuse tension, and that trust, when earned, was resilient enough to survive centuries of cultural expectation. One afternoon, while navigating the library gardens, where plants existed in multiple temporal states simultaneously, Adrian accidentally created a minor temporal loop. A flower bloomed, withered, and bloomed again around his hand. Lyriel observed him with mock sternness. "You are a danger to botany," she said. "I prefer the term creative influence," Adrian replied. "It's much more flattering." She rolled her eyes, her ears flicking in amusement. "Flattering to whom?" "To history," he said, "which now has to keep up with me." Despite the teasing, a quiet ease settled between them. The tension of jealousy, expectation, and unfamiliarity had been replaced by companionship. Laughter became common in their interactions. Shared silence, too, held meaning rather than anxiety. Adrian looked out across the expanse of the Empire from the highest observation dome, feeling for the first time a sense of permanence not imposed, but chosen. Lyriel's hand found his, and he squeezed it gently. Neither needed to speak. Their presence was affirmation enough. In the Empire that had offered him a reward, he had discovered agency. In the princess who had seemed untouchable, he had discovered warmth. And in himself, he had discovered the courage to remain when leaving would have been simpler, safer, and expected. The stars beyond the glass shimmered, endless and patient. And for once, Adrian did not feel small before them. He felt steady, present, chosen. Princess Lyriel's green eyes met his, luminous and steady, and for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that what had begun as a reward could endure as something real, something shared, something willingly chosen by both of them. Adrian smiled, the weight of the galaxy still pressing lightly against his shoulders, and said, "Well, seems like we're stuck with each other." And Adrian knew, with a grin that stretched the limits of human audacity, that he had never expected to be this happy in an alien empire. That the reward offered could have been fleeting, ceremonial, or simply awkward. But what they had discovered together was lasting, profound, and entirely unexpected. He glanced at her once more. "Ready to see what the gravity field does when we run?" Lyriel laughed fully this time, the sound echoing softly against the living walls, and stepped forward. Adrian followed, and for the first time, the universe felt